The making of a monster, Caligula and his weird habits that shocked an empire. Picture the most powerful man in the ancient world, standing on the shores of the English Channel, ordering 300,000 Roman soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of war against Neptune. This wasn't a military exercise or a symbolic gesture. Emperor Caligula genuinely believed he was waging war against the sea god himself, and he expected Rome's finest legions to fill their helmets with shells as proof of their divine victory. Welcome back to Chapters in History. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the twisted mind of Rome's most infamous emperor, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula. If you're new here and love exploring history's most shocking personalities, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the past. When Caligula became emperor in 37 CE, Romans celebrated in the streets. He was young, charismatic, and the beloved nephew of the popular general Germanicus. Within months, that celebration turned to horror, as Rome discovered they had placed a madman on the throne of the world's greatest empire. But Caligula's reign wasn't just marked by cruelty. It was defined by behaviors so bizarre, so utterly incomprehensible, that they shocked an empire that had seen everything. Today, we're exploring the weird habits and twisted obsessions that made Caligula's 4-year reign a nightmare that Rome never forgot. Chapter 1. The Making of a Monster. To understand Caligula's bizarre behaviors, we need to examine the twisted childhood that shaped the future emperor's mind. Born into the imperial family, young Gaius spent his early years in military camps along the Germanic frontier, where soldiers nicknamed him Caligula, meaning little boots, for the miniature military sandals he wore. But this seemingly innocent childhood was actually a masterclass in psychological damage. Caligula watched his father Germanicus die under mysterious circumstances, likely poisoned by rivals. He saw his mother and brothers imprisoned and murdered by Emperor Tiberius, who kept Caligula alive only as a potential heir. Growing up on Capri as Tiberius's guest prisoner, Caligula learned that survival meant hiding his true thoughts and feelings behind a mask of compliance. Ancient sources tell us he became skilled at concealing his emotions, never showing grief for his murdered family members or anger at their killers. This psychological repression may have planted the seeds for his later explosive behaviors. Tiberius himself reportedly recognized something disturbing in young Caligula. According to the historian Suetonius, the old emperor once said he was nursing a viper for the Roman people. But even Tiberius couldn't have imagined how accurate his prediction would prove to be. When Caligula finally became emperor at age 24, he had spent years suppressing his personality while surrounded by luxury, violence, and the constant threat of death. The combination proved toxic. Within months of gaining absolute power, the charming young prince revealed himself to be something far more dangerous, a man with no moral boundaries and the resources to indulge every twisted impulse. The early signs were subtle. Caligula began spending enormous sums on games and spectacles, far beyond what even wealthy Rome could afford. He started making decisions that seemed impulsive rather than calculated. Most ominously, he began showing signs of the grandiosity and paranoia that would define his reign. Roman historians debate whether Caligula was genuinely insane or simply a sociopath drunk on power. What's clear is that his behaviors became increasingly detached from reality as his reign progressed, suggesting that absolute power didn't corrupt him so much as it revealed the monster he had always been inside. Chapter 2. Conversations with Gods in Statues. One of Caligula's most disturbing habits was his belief that he could communicate directly with the gods, and more bizarrely, that they regularly spoke back to him. This wasn't the normal Roman practice of consulting priests or interpreting omens. Caligula claimed to have personal, ongoing conversations with divine beings, and he expected everyone around him to take these communications seriously. The emperor's favorite divine correspondent was Jupiter, king of the Roman gods. Caligula would often be found in temples having animated discussions with Jupiter's statue, sometimes speaking in whispers as if sharing secrets, other times shouting angrily as if involved in heated arguments. Palace servants reported hearing Caligula's voice echoing through marble halls at all hours of the night as he carried on these one-sided conversations. But Jupiter wasn't Caligula's only divine contact. He claimed special relationships with several goddesses, including Venus and Diana, and would spend hours in their temples seeking advice on state matters. Roman senators grew accustomed to receiving imperial edicts that began with phrases like, "As Venus has counseled me," or "Following Diana's wisdom." The most shocking aspect of these conversations was Caligula's belief that the gods were treating him as an equal, rather than a worshipper. He would boast about jokes he'd shared with Jupiter, or complain about disagreements he'd had with other deities. In his mind, the pantheon of Roman gods was simply another social circle, where he belonged by right of his imperial status. Caligula's divine communications weren't limited to formal temple settings. He would suddenly stop during Senate meetings to listen to voices only he could hear, then announce policy changes based on divine instructions. He once interrupted a military briefing to have a lengthy discussion with a statue of Mars, the god of war, about proper battlefield tactics. The emperor's guards and servants learned to stay silent during these episodes, understanding that questioning Caligula's divine conversations could result in immediate execution. The Roman elite found themselves in the surreal position of having to pretend that their emperor's obvious mental instability was actually evidence of his special relationship with the gods. Perhaps most disturbing was how Caligula used these alleged divine communications to justify his most cruel and irrational decisions. Executions were ordered because Jupiter demands it. Massive public works projects were undertaken because the gods require proper monuments. By claiming divine sanction for his actions, Caligula made himself effectively immune to criticism or opposition. Chapter 3: The Horse Consul and Other Animal Obsessions. No discussion of Caligula's bizarre behaviors would be complete without examining his relationship with his beloved horse, Incitatus. This wasn't simply a case of an emperor who loved his favorite mount. Caligula's treatment of Incitatus reveals the depth of his disconnection from reality and his contempt for Roman political institutions. Incitatus lived better than most Roman citizens. Caligula housed the horse in a marble stable with an ivory manger and purple blankets. The horse had its own servants, ate from a golden bucket, and wore jeweled collars worth more than most Romans earned in a lifetime. Dinner guests at the palace were expected to treat Incitatus with the same respect they showed human members of the imperial family. But Caligula's plans for Incitatus went far beyond luxury accommodations. The emperor seriously intended to make his horse a consul, one of Rome's highest political offices, traditionally held by the empire's most distinguished statesmen. Ancient sources suggest this wasn't just a cruel joke at the Senate's expense, but a genuine plan that Caligula was actively working to implement before his assassination. The proposed horse consulship reveals Caligula's twisted sense of humor and his growing contempt for Roman political traditions. By elevating an animal to the consulship, he would have demonstrated that Roman senators were so worthless that a horse could perform their duties equally well. It was simultaneously an insult to the Senate and a declaration that traditional Roman institutions meant nothing to him. Caligula's animal obsessions extended beyond Incitatus. He kept exotic pets from across the empire, including lions, bears, and various birds that he treated as advisors and companions. Palace visitors reported seeing the emperor having serious conversations with these animals, seeking their opinions on state matters as if they were human counselors. The emperor also developed peculiar habits around animal sacrifice, one of Rome's most sacred religious practices. Instead of following traditional rituals, Caligula would sometimes spare animals at the last moment, claiming they had spoken to him and revealed important information. Other times, he would order mass sacrifices of hundreds of animals because he believed the gods were angry with Rome. Perhaps most disturbing was Caligula's treatment of the sacred geese kept at Roman temples. These birds were traditionally respected as messengers of the gods, but Caligula began using them as a sort of divine advisory council, making important decisions based on their behavior and sounds. Roman priests found themselves in the impossible position of having to interpret goose behavior as imperial policy guidance. Chapter 4: Sexual Scandals and Moral Outrages. Caligula's sexual behavior shocked even Romans, who were hardly prudish about intimate matters. His appetites were not just excessive, but deliberately transgressive, designed to violate every social and religious taboo Roman society held sacred. The emperor's most notorious scandal involved his relationships with his own sisters, particularly Drusilla, whom he treated more like a wife than a sibling. This wasn't simply rumor or political gossip. Caligula openly appeared with Drusilla at state functions, showered her with honors normally reserved for empresses, and after her death had her declared a goddess and built temples in her honor. When Drusilla died, possibly from illness but some sources suggest poison, Caligula's grief transformed into something approaching madness. He declared a period of public mourning, during which laughing, bathing, or dining with family became capital offenses. The emperor himself reportedly spent days speaking to Drusilla's corpse before finally allowing her burial, after which he continued having conversations with her statue. Caligula's sexual demands extended to the wives and daughters of Roman senators and nobles. He would openly proposition married women at dinner parties, sometimes taking them to private chambers while their husbands waited nervously in the dining hall. Refusing the emperor's advances meant possible execution, while submitting meant public humiliation and the destruction of family honor. The emperor also established what amounted to an imperial brothel, forcing noble Roman women to work as prostitutes for his entertainment and profit. This wasn't just about sexual gratification. It was a deliberate assault on Roman concepts of family honor and female virtue. By degrading aristocratic women, Caligula demonstrated his power to destroy the social foundations of Roman society. Perhaps most shocking was Caligula's habit of discussing his sexual activities in public forums. He would boast about his conquests during Senate meetings, describe intimate details during religious ceremonies, and make crude jokes about senators' wives and daughters while the men themselves were present. This behavior went far beyond mere indecency. It was psychological warfare designed to humiliate and intimidate Rome's elite. Caligula's sexual outrages also included forced marriages and divorces among the Roman nobility, treating aristocratic families like pieces on a chessboard to be moved for his amusement. He would order divorces between couples he found boring and arrange new marriages between people who had never met, then attend the weddings to mock the participants. Chapter 5. Megalomaniacal Building Projects. Caligula's architectural ambitions revealed both his disconnection from financial reality and his grandiose self-image. His building projects weren't just expensive, they were physically impossible, economically ruinous, and designed more to feed his ego than serve any practical purpose. The most famous of these projects was his temporary bridge across the Bay of Naples. Caligula ordered ships to be lashed together in a line stretching nearly 3 miles from Baiae to Puteoli, then had a roadway constructed on top of them. The emperor then spent 2 days riding back and forth across this floating bridge, wearing Alexander the Great's breastplate, and followed by his Praetorian Guard, claiming he was demonstrating Roman mastery over the sea. The bridge project consumed enormous resources for no practical benefit. Hundreds of ships were taken out of commercial service, disrupting Mediterranean trade. Thousands of workers labored for weeks to create a structure that existed solely for Caligula's brief theatrical performance. After his 2-day show, the bridge was dismantled and the ships returned to service, leaving Rome poorer and no more secure. Caligula also planned to extend his palace complex directly to the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, creating a physical connection between his residence and Rome's most sacred shrine. This project would have required demolishing entire neighborhoods and rebuilding significant portions of central Rome. Also, the emperor could walk directly from his bedroom to Jupiter's temple without setting foot on public streets. Even more ambitious was Caligula's plan to dig a canal across the Isthmus of Corinth in Greece, a project that wouldn't be completed until the 19th century. The emperor ordered thousands of workers to begin excavation, apparently believing that Roman engineering could overcome geological challenges that had stymied builders for centuries. Perhaps most revealing was Caligula's obsession with building monuments to himself. He ordered colossal statues erected throughout the empire, including one that was supposedly taller than the Colossus of Rhodes. These statues weren't just large, they were designed to dwarf existing monuments to previous emperors, physically demonstrating Caligula's superiority over his predecessors. The emperor also planned to carve his own face onto existing statues of gods. literally replacing divine faces with his own likeness. This project would have required defacing some of Rome's most sacred artwork, but Caligula saw no problem with improving religious art by adding his features to representations of Jupiter, Apollo, and other major deities. Chapter 6: The Campaign Against Neptune. Perhaps no single episode better captures Caligula's complete break from reality than his military campaign against Neptune, god of the sea. This wasn't a metaphorical war or a symbolic gesture. Caligula genuinely believed he could defeat a deity through conventional military means. The war began when Caligula decided to invade Britain, but his forces, for unclear reasons, never crossed the English Channel. Instead of admitting failure or logistical problems, the emperor declared that Neptune was preventing the invasion through divine interference. Rather than abandon the campaign, Caligula decided to punish the sea god directly. Caligula ordered his legions to march to the coastline in full battle formation, as if preparing to fight a conventional enemy. Roman soldiers, trained to conquer barbarian tribes and rival armies, found themselves standing on beaches while their emperor shouted challenges at the waves. The scene must have been surreal. Rome's finest warriors arranged for battle against an opponent that consisted entirely of water. The emperor then commanded his troops to attack the sea itself. Soldiers thrust their spears into waves, hacked at the water with their swords, and fired arrows into the surf. For hours, Roman legions conducted a serious military assault against Neptune's domain, while Caligula supervised the operation as if it were a conventional siege. When the tide began to recede, Caligula declared victory, claiming that Neptune was retreating in the face of Roman might. He ordered his soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of war, filling their helmets and shields with what he proclaimed were treasures stolen from Neptune's underwater palace. The emperor was so pleased with his divine victory that he planned a triumph in Rome to celebrate the defeat of Neptune. Roman soldiers would march through the streets carrying seashells instead of enemy weapons, while Caligula would ride in his chariot wearing a crown of seaweed and coral as symbols of his conquest over the sea god. This episode reveals the extent of Caligula's delusions and his complete inability to distinguish between reality and fantasy. More disturbing was his expectation that everyone around him would participate in his delusions as if they were perfectly reasonable. Roman officers who might have conquered actual enemies found themselves pretending that collecting seashells was a legitimate military victory. Final chapter: The End of Madness. Caligula's bizarre behaviors weren't just personal quirks. They were symptoms of a deeper madness that threatened to destroy the Roman Empire from within. His 4-year reign demonstrated what happened when unlimited power was placed in the hands of someone completely detached from reality. By 41 CE, even Caligula's closest supporters recognized that the emperor's madness was endangering Rome itself. His financial excesses had nearly bankrupted the empire. His religious outrages had offended traditional Romans, and his treatment of the Senate had created a climate of terror that made effective government impossible. The end came on January 24, 41 CE, when Caligula was assassinated by his own Praetorian Guard. The conspiracy included senators, military officers, and even palace servants who could no longer tolerate the emperor's increasingly erratic behavior. Caligula was stabbed 30 times while leaving a theatrical performance, finally paying the price for his years of cruelty and madness. But Caligula's death didn't erase the damage he had done to Roman society. His reign had shown that the imperial system could place a madman in absolute power with no effective checks on his behavior. Future emperors would have to contend with the memory of Caligula's excesses and the fear that unlimited power could corrupt even the most promising leaders. The weird habits we've explored today weren't just amusing anecdotes. They were warning signs of the dangers inherent in autocratic government. When one person holds absolute power, their personal psychological problems become threats to entire civilizations. Caligula's legacy serves as a reminder that power doesn't just corrupt, it can also reveal and amplify existing mental instability in ways that endanger everyone around the powerful individual. His conversations with statues, his war against Neptune, and his plan to make a horse consul were just bizarre. They were symptoms of a diseased mind given unlimited resources to act on its delusions. If this exploration of Caligula's twisted psyche has fascinated you, hit that like button and subscribe to Chapters in History for more deep dives into history's most shocking personalities. Which of Caligula's weird habits surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring the chapters that shaped our world, even the ones that show us how power can transform promising leaders into monsters.